Hey, welcome back to the series that we've been doing on the Tortured Poets department. I've been going track by track to see if I can find a deeper meaning within each of the songs. Today, instead of actually doing a song, we're going to be going through the album Prologue. I was planning on reading it once I got my copy of the album, but I still haven't received it yet. And I did get a couple comments from the two videos that I've already posted about the first two tracks that it would kind of make sense to read it before keep going. So I 100% agree with you guys. So today we're going to be pulling up the album Prologue and reading it together. If you are familiar, I do different versions of my videos on Patreon. Usually it's an extended version, but there's not a lot. Other than having a double album, there's not technically like extended content. So for this series, what I decided to do is posting a couple things a little bit earlier on the Patreon. So today the video will be about the prologue, but if you're interested in seeing things early, you could also see the reaction to My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys. If you want, like I said, if you want to see that a little bit earlier, but if not, come back another day and it will be posted. So without further ado, let's just get into this prologue. Alright, so it should be on the screen with, so it should be on the screen as I read it, but just know that this was a screenshot that I found on the internet, so I'm not sure if everything's going to be perfectly legible for you. But let's see. It says, in summation, at this hearing, I stand before my fellow members of the Tortured Poets Department with a summary of my findings, a debrief, a detailed rewinding, I think? Yeah. A debrief, a detailed rewinding for the purpose of warning for the sake of reminding. Ooh, okay. I don't know if I want to read the whole thing or go line by line like I usually would do. I'll read the second one and then we'll take that as like a little paragraph. As you might unfortunately recall, I've been stuck in a case of restricted humanity, which explains my plea here today of temporary insanity. Okay, so definitely getting the vibes of, you know, like a court case or like an investigation, like if she's working for the police or something like that where she is... I feel like it sounds a little bit more like a trial because it sounds like she's trying to defend herself a little bit, especially with that second line, which we'll get into in a second. But just going back to the top, after hearing this hearing, I stand before my fellow members of the Tortured Poets Department. So to me, the Tortured Poets Department are her peers or the people, like the jury of this case. She's like pleading to them, like, before you get the evidence, before you hear my findings, before you hear other people talk about me, before you hear anything, just know that I'm coming to you as a person, going to state the facts, and I hope that you kind of resonate with it. Like, I'm hoping that despite what you might hear the bad, you might hear the good, you might hear the really bad, but just remember that I'm submitting this into you for consideration. So, it's kind of what I'm thinking there. And then, as you might all unfortunately recall, I've been stuck in a case of restricted humanity, which explains my plea here today. So she's saying that, you know, with typical court cases, or not typical court cases, but in a court case, when someone pleads insanity, it's like they're saying like they're most likely guilty of the actions that they're about to hear and witness today, but they're trying to defend themselves by saying that they were not in the right headspace. And usually what happens with those cases, if, you know, the jury or the court or whatever the case may be does agree with a person about insanity, usually instead of like jail time, a lot of times it's more of like rehab or so it's sort of like mental health facility to get that person. They don't get released, I don't believe, once they're cured, because I think it's an ongoing thing, but their punishment is the help that they need, essentially. So her saying that is saying like, you're gonna hear some bad things and I'm guilty of all of it, but I was in a really rough time. And I guess her plea of insanity is like that restricted humanity, and it kind of makes me think of like just being like how she says often being pigeonholed to be a celebrity. Like, you know, celebrity has its unfortunately like great things about it, but there are the things where you feel subhuman, you don't feel like you're going through the same experiences of everyone else. Or I kind of think of it as like a bubble, you know, like it's not that she's not a real person and doesn't have real experiences, but you can't say that a lot of her life is manufactured into a bubble. Like, if she wants to go to a store or something like that, she might be able to, but she has 10 bodyguards with her. Like, you know, I don't think there's an often time where she wouldn't be in this so-called bubble unless if she's at home. So, in my head, if you think about that, like, so you're either in the bubble in public, or when you're not in the public, or when you're not in the bubble or in public, whatever, you're at home. But then think about jail or something like that. That's like, confined, what is it when you're in, It's like when you're away from everyone else. Solitary confinement. Like, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, she was like, I was left with my own thoughts and this is the product of it. So the next two parts says, you see the pendulum swings, oh, the chaos that it brings, leads the caged beast to do the most curious things. Lovers spend years denying what ill-fated resentment rotting away, galaxies we created. It's kind of getting hard to read, but stars placed and glued meticulously by hand next to the ceiling fan. Okay, so when you say the pendulum swings, that means that your fortune goes up and down depending on the scenario. You know, some people love you, some people hate you. That's just the way the pendulum swings. Sometimes you're on the good side of it, sometimes you're on the bad of it. So she's kind of saying, like, depending on what side of it, it's always going to bring chaos. You're either so loved to the point, and that kind of makes sense if you think about the different eras of her life, in my opinion. Like, you're either in, it's never calm, I don't think. It's always, you're either so loved to the point of chaos, or you're so hated to the point of chaos. And it leads the caged beast to do the most curious things. So again, going into this album, I think I'm gonna have to have some sort of like again, a defense mechanism is like, we're gonna hear some crazy things. And we have to remember that this was her point of being insane. So it was a part of the growth, I guess. But, and then the italicized lovers has to be a connection to the album Lover. They spend years denying what ill-fated resentment rotting away. So that just feels like something like You're Losing Me, where you didn't want to admit that it was ending. Like, you had a great person, you had a great relationship, you had all of the things that you needed at that point in time, and you, as many years as you've had it, like when you think of the song Lover, I spent, 3 years, I loved you 3 summers now, but did you spend equally the amount of time denying that it actually wasn't that? You know, you might have had those 3 good years, but if you were only together for 7, 8 or something like that, you know, did you spend almost half the time that you were together? Like, did the bad part start outweighing the good at a certain point and you just didn't want to admit it? And then the galaxies that we created, stars placed and glued meticulously by hand next to the ceiling fan. I'm not exactly sure what that would mean necessarily. Like, galaxies we created makes me think of, like, we created our own world, where we lived in our own world for so long, and that could be the bubble, could be, like, denying the relationship or denying the ending of the relationship. And I like the stanza line, whatever, about glued meticulously by hand, because that makes me think of, you know, something like The Mastermind, where you, now looking back, you could interpret Mastermind as that was your denial. Like, you know, like when you heard it the first time, or when I heard it the first time and reacted to it, it was like, she's just a smart person knowing what she wants and she knows how to get it. But then don't you think about it now in sense, like, you never had fate, you forced it together. It's like, if you have 2 puzzle pieces and if you cut off enough pieces, it's gonna work, but will it? So it kind of feels like if you created a planet or a galaxy just for you two, and then you were the one that was placing the stars everywhere, you were hurting that sheepdog wherever it needed to be and then calling it love. And I love that. I love that so much. Not for her. I hate that was her experience, but I love the way that she's like framing this already. Just because I feel like it's already giving a little context to the first 2 songs, where Fortnite and the Tortured Poets department, they were kind of like not necessarily about, I don't think, still the relationship that she had with her ex-boyfriend. And those might be some of the questionable things that were going on that we need to like look through a lens of insanity for. But I don't know enough about that situation to kind of really guess, but that would be my interpretation of that now. Okay, so next couple parts. Tried wishing on comets, tried dimming the shine, tried to orbit his planet, some stars never align. And in one conversation I tore the whole sky. Spring sprung forth with dazzling freedoms of hue, then a crash from the skylight bursting through something old, someone hollowed, and who told me he could be brand new. Okay, so we're gonna stop there. So going back to that building the own planet and kind of forcing those puzzle pieces together, it keeps on with that a little bit, where, you know, tried wishing on comets, I tried my best to pray or wish for a better scenario, and clearly it didn't work. Tried dimming the shine, tried to orbit his planet, and that makes me think a lot of something like, what's the song? Bejeweled, where, you know, She said a diamond's gotta shine, you can't stop the shine, and tried to orbit his planet. Again, I would assume being with Taylor Swift, she's the planet, she's the sun, she's the biggest, she is the galaxy, and I can understand from the other person's perspective of how that could be hard. But let's not pretend that Taylor Swift has not made so many songs about saying you gotta know what you're getting yourself into. You know, like peace. And you know I love mentioning peace, but she literally lays it all out there saying like, I can never give you peace. We will never be equals. As much as a relationship relies on being equal, I will find ways to make us equal, but we are never going to be equal just because this power imbalance is so bad that like, there's never gonna be a scenario where this just is so normal. And that's what's kind of, I would assume, is frustrating, is that, you know, she can't change it, and she gives people the utmost warning, fourth warning for these things, and it still seems like it's a surprise to the other person, and that's what I don't understand sometimes when I listen to these things. But tried to orbit his planet, and she tried to dim the shine, things that she really can't do, but she tried to make those efforts and say, you know, I guess trying to remove Taylor Swift from the relationship. Okay, the Taylor Swift that the world knows. Like, trying to just be maybe like a Taylor. But, again, just really doesn't work. So in one conversation I tore up the whole sky, there was a point where she had to tear down everything that she created. And I think that's also a really good reference to, like, something like You're Losing Me. But dazzling freedoms of hue, so spring forth, so let's maybe like the time in which like she finally like let go of this relationship, and a crash from skylight, like she broke out and then she was free in some sort of way, and something old, something hollowed. It just like maybe she saw, once the light came in, the daylight came in, you know, she kind of saw everything for what it was. You can see the hollowed person, you can see that they've been like, I can see, like, you're just, like, the light is what's making you realize, like, I was in the dark for so long, and I'm finally realizing that, look how bad this was. Like, once you turn on the light in that cave, you're like, oh, I was under a very false, you know, false hope, I don't know, I was going to say God, but, you know, a false sense of reality until a third party came in and said, wow, this is really wrong. But continuing on, it says, and so I was out of the... I don't know what that says. Maybe cave. I just said the word cave. I'm going to say it's cave. And so I was out of the cave and into the microwave? Okay, I have to skip those first two lines at the top because I genuinely can't tell what it says. Out of the slammer and into a tidal wave, how gallant to save the empress from her gilded tower, swinging a sword he could hardly lift. But loneliness struck at the fatal hour, low-hanging fruit on his wine-stained lips. Okay, I promise that I'm not, like, reading at a third grade level. I just really can't, like, read it. So I might have to read that again to myself for a second. I might be interpreting this wrong, but out of the slammer into the tidal wave of how the gallant saved the empress, it's making me think of something like a Disney princess, like Rapunzel or something like that, where, you know, she finally gets out of the tower that she's been locked in, the prison, whatever, the slammer, and then swinging a sword he could barely lift. So maybe there was a prince that saved her, or there's gonna be someone in the storylines of the songs, you know, that's saving her from something, but it's also like a sword that they could barely lift, and I would go back to assume that that's gonna be another person that she has to fourth warn about being in a relationship with Taylor Swift. Like, a sword he could barely lift is making me think of, like, there's a world to carry. She is that planet, that galaxy, that world on his back, and, like, it's not his responsibility to take care of her, but at the same time, it's like, you're taking on a bigger job than you probably know at the point in time. So, you know, you're gonna lift this sword, so that makes me think that she's gonna give this person a chance because they're saying the right things, but at the same time, it's like she knows that this person isn't going to be able to carry the weight just like everyone previous. I think the next part's getting a little bit more clear. He never even scratched the surface of me, none of them did. Oh, wow. Okay, so that's exactly kind of what I just said. Like, they never scratched the surface. They never, again, these people are trying. And it's not that I don't think it's not my place to talk about her boyfriends, but I don't think it's a lack of them trying. I think it's just a lack of an they underestimate the role that it takes. But next part is, in summation, it was not a love affair. I screamed while bringing my fist to my coffee ring desk. It was a mutual manic phase. It was self-harm. It was something, and then cardiac arrest. A smirk creeps onto this poet's face because it's the worst men that I write best. Oh wow. Oh wow, that's good. So going back to the whole thing about it being on a trial, that's really like the ending part for me. In summation, it was not a love affair. You know, maybe these songs are going to narrate it as so. Like, it's gonna look like she is in love with this person and that's what it was. It was a relationship, and she's saying no. Again, it was insanity. It was self-harm. It was manic. I was at my worst. I was at the most vulnerable. Thinking about leaving the slammer or the tower or whatever, after a long relationship, you're going to be leaving this circumstance and say, you know, I'm leaving this. And I was at my most vulnerable. Someone came, grabbed the sword, and, you know, probably said a few of the right things, and I went head first into it, but really I didn't take the time to heal. So that's why it became self-harm. Like, I was harming myself to the point of just not letting myself go. I get it. I think I get this. And then on the poet's face, I'm writing, it's the worst men that I write my best material. So now I'm thinking, like, if you're kind of calling that, to me that makes it sound like she's calling this her album. Like, this is her body of work. Like, this is going to be her best. So, like, now I'm going into this thinking, like, really hyped. And then the very last part is, and so now I enter in evidence my tarnished coats of arms, my muses acquired like bruises, my talismans and the charms of tick, tick, tick love bombs, in the veins of pitch black ink, all's fair in love and poetry. Okay, so she enters in her evidence the tarnished of coat of arms, so that's kind of just like she always went into situations bulletproof, and I think that's even somewhat like the Reputation poetry of how, like, she got hurt very badly and had to get back up, and it was about the people who were there when you get back up. She's putting into this evidence, which is the album, my muses, my acquired like bruises. You're gonna see every nick, you're gonna see every fall that I had during this phase. My talismans and my charms. So my talisman and charms makes me think of, you know, her not being completely innocent either. You know, as I said, the insanity is proving that you are guilty of something. And talisman and charms makes me think that, you know, these people came into your life, they said the right words, maybe you were tricked in a way, but you also have your own talisman and charms. Look at things like Mastermind. You will manipulate a situation, if not just as much, and that's kind of what I think of that. But the tick-tick of love bombs is definitely what I think about that person out of the slammer just saying the right things. That's kind of what I'm thinking of that, like a love bomb, because love bomb is just like saying the right things at the right time to make someone fall in love with you when, like, really everything that you're kind of saying isn't necessarily true. And then the very last thing is all fair in love and poetry. You know, this is my insanity. I'm going to tell my story. You're going to be a part of the story just because you were a part of this journey, but all's fair. I'm going to say what I want. Kind of the true message of every Taylor Swift album. If you're in my life, and good or the bad, I will share the story. So, sincerely, the chairman of the Tortured Poets Department. I think this was one of the most intricate introductions to the albums. Like, a lot of her other album introductions that I've read, it was mostly from the re-recordings, but it was talking about the time period of, like, oh, I went through this in the 1989 era, which, not that they were bad, but, like, this one feels like it's really telling us a story. So what I'm getting out of this at the end of it is that we're going into this album gonna be some of her best work. She was at a really low point for a lot of this album. So you're gonna hear some questionable experiences from her, and I think there's gonna be a love interest that, I don't know if it's gonna be a love album, but I think there's gonna be somewhat of a love interest outside of the breakup of her, you know, previous relationship. Maybe that's Travis Kelce, I don't know. Maybe, is she calling him like her low point? I'm not sure. But thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you interpreted from this. I think something like these are really fun to go through with you guys, so let me know. But thank you so much, and I will see you in our next video.